Good morning, my friends and acquaintances. I am now going to do my political rant on politics. This, however, is not going to be your standard free-floating hostility and ranting. It's more along the lines of an attempted structured thesis on whether or not Donald Trump is in fact a racist and or white supremacist and or white nationalist. Um, I've been wanting to do this for the past few weeks, given his activities that he's been having against, say, the Squad and Elijah Cummings, or the places they come from, and it's just it just reverberates what people have said about him and the things that he has said beforehand. It is easy to throw out terms as racist with him. Also saying that he's a white nationalist or a white supremacist. My thing is that I went back and forth on these terms when it comes to him, and I'll address that a little later. But it is my theory that he is at least racist. And I'm going to go through a number of instances where, over the long decades of his life, that Trump has been overtly racist, or his activities in his businesses was considered racist, or at least made people worry about racism, that they did certain things in order to appease him or not to cause any trouble with him. Now, why this goes back and forth with me, in a sense, is that we know that Donald Trump doesn't live in the realm of consequence. That he doesn't quite get told no, or whatever he's doing is wrong with any tone of confidence from anybody. And as such, he has no impulse control. He has no tact, and he just says whatever vomits out of his brain. Usually attempts to hurt the other person as maximum as humanly possible. But is that a denotation of racism or white nationalism or supremacy or any of that shit? Well, let's find out. I have a list of these instances that I'm going to go through, and also a kind of a history of his family. Now, to start with, when in terms of the family, there was an article talking about the arrest of Fred Trump, Donald's father, in 1927 during a Klan riot. This gets put up ever so often. You see it a number of times. However, there is some discrepancies when it comes to this. And give me a moment, and I will go and find these discrepancies. All right, time men. Now let's go into the article on Fred Trump. On Memorial Day 1927, a brawl erupted in New York, led by sympathizers of an Italian fascist movement and the Ku Klux Klan. In the fascist brawl, which took place in the Bronx, 2 Italian men were killed by anti-fascists. Ironic. In Queens, 1,000 white-robed Klansmen marched through the Jamaican neighborhood, eventually spurring off an all-out brawl in which 7 men were arrested. One of those arrests was Fred Trump of 175-24 Devonshire in Jamaica, Queens. Now, why this is not really a clean-cut, like, example of Fred Trump being like a member of the Klan or whatever, or however you want to maybe make the easy assumption, which yeah, any of us can be guilty of this. Is that there was some discrepancies when it came to the arrest and what had actually happened. Um, at the time of the Klan riot, a week prior, the police commissioner, Joseph Warren, was warned that the Klan intended to parade in hoods and gowns. Warren said that they were not issued a permit to have a parade, but a report later said that the Klan had permission from the Grand Army of the Republic, a veterans organization that had charge of the parade arrangements. However, on the day of the parade, the police were unable to keep at least 1,000 Klansmen from participating. Were unable to keep them. The New York Times stated that 1,000 Klansmen and 100 policemen staged a free-for-all battle in Jamaica, which is Jamaica, Queens. Fred Trump, then 21, was arrested at the parade along with 6 others, according to the New York Times. However, unlike the other men arrested who faced the various charges of assault and disorderly conduct, the Times report that Trump was discharged. PolitiFact checked other reports of the riot and find more information and found some discrepancies. In May 31st, 1927, Brooklyn Daily Eagle article named 6 prisoners, all but one bystander, Ralph Lewis, were called avowed Klansmen by the police, but this article did not mention Trump's name. According to the Daily Star, Trump was dismissed on charges of refusing to disperse from a parade when ordered to do so. In a June 2nd, 1927, Long Island Daily Press article said 7 of the Baroque marchers were arrested, so Fred Trump might have been wearing a Klan's robe. Alberto Martinez, a history professor of University of Texas, Austin, wrote his own in-depth report on Fred's arrest. Even if Fred Trump was involved in the riot, it doesn't necessarily mean he was a KKK member or marcher, because news reports and court recordings both specify that the local spectators, men and women, got involved in the disrupting the parade, Martinez wrote in an email. Additionally, he said that Fred Trump was only one arrested who was promptly released without any charges. Martinez said the disposition of the police officers also made him question whether Fred Trump was involved. The Queens County grand jury accused the police for disgraceful assault not upon the Klansmen, but innocent civilians along the line of the march in the parade. A police car hit and seriously injured Lewis, the innocent bystander who was arrested, and several minors were injured by the police. The president of the Grand Jurors Association of Queens said the atrocities were committed by the police, which were unwarranted and should be condemned. These points show the police clashed not only with Klansmen, but with innocent bystanders, which again calls into question whether Fred Trump was necessarily a Klan marcher or a local spectator. PolitiFact believes this indicates, at least from their point of view, that when it comes to Fred Trump being involved in the Klan riot, as in being a member of the Klan involved in the riot, they don't believe that's true. So, in all the fairness that I try to show here, I do have to bring that out because if you're gonna say that he was part of a Klan riot, don't just leave that there. That's just go into detail. It doesn't really necessarily say that he wasn't. It's just that everything was so much up in the air and there was no concrete evidence that he was released. And it sounds more along the lines that this event, if there was really anybody more at fault here, was not only that the actual Klansmen and the attack on the 2 Italian men, was also the police, who evidently was a little bit indiscriminate when it comes to who they were squaring off against. So, yeah, there's a little ambiguity and there's a little bit of murkiness there. But that's partial sliver of the family history. Whether or not you want to take Donald Trump's activities, behaviors, and say that it's, family grown. All right? However, let's go to Trump himself. And we're going to have a little breakdown of Trump's history, taken largely from Dara Lynn's list for Vox. And op-ed by Nicholas Kristof of the New York Times. You know, I know some people are just like, article bias, news bias, fake news, whatever. You know, take any of this, including my opinion, as a grain of salt, but decide for yourselves, as everyone should. No one should take anything at face value, even me. Always, always question. George Carlin, grandfather to us all. Anyway, so let's start with this and go back to 1973, 5 years before I was born. The United States Department of Justice, under the Nixon administration, sued the Trump Management Corporation for violating the Fair Housing Act. Federal officials found evidence that Trump had refused to rent to black tenants and lied to black applicants about whether apartments were available, among other accusations. Trump said the federal government was trying to get him to rent to welfare recipients. In the aftermath, he signed an agreement in 1975 agreeing not to discriminate to renters of color without admitting to discriminating before. Because he never admits to anything, does he? In the 1980s, Kip Brown, a former employee at Trump's castle, accused another one of Trump's businesses of discrimination. When Trump and Ivana, his first wife, came to the casino, the bosses would order all the black people off the floor, Brown said. It was the 80s, I was a teenager, but I remember it. They put us all in the back. In 1988, in a commencement speech at Lehigh University, Trump spent much of his speech accusing countries like Japan of stripping the United States of their economic dignity. This matches much as what his current rhetoric on China is today. So I guess they're also currency manipulators. But I think the first knee jerk that you would hear of any defender at this point was that, oh, it was the 80s. We're having a car rivalry with Japan, but that's another instance, isn't it? In 1989, in a controversial case that has been characterized as modern-day lynching, 4 black teenagers and 1 Latino teenager, the Central Park Five, were accused of attacking and raping a jogger in New York City. Trump immediately took charge in the case, running an ad in local papers demanding to bring back the death penalty and bring back our police. The teens convicted were later vacated after they spent 7 to 13 years in prison, and the city paid $41 million in settlements to the teens. We're now obviously adults. But Trump, in October 2016, said he still believes they were guilty, despite DNA evidence to the contrary, because Lord knows he said something and he can't admit to being wrong. So double down, double down, double down. In 1991, a book by John O'Donnell, former president of Trump Plaza Hotel and Casino in Atlantic City, quoted Trump's criticism of a black accountant. Quote, "Black guys counting my money? I hate it. The only kind of people I want counting my money are short guys that wear yarmulkes every day. I think that the guy is lazy. It's probably not his fault, because laziness is a trait in blacks. It really is, I believe that. It's not anything they can control." Trump at first denied the remarks, but later said in a 1997 Playboy interview that the stuff O'Donnell wrote about me was probably true. 1992. Trump Plaza Hotel and Casino had to pay $200,000 fine because it's transferred black and women dealers' tables off the tables to accommodate big-time gamblers' prejudices. So, someone else who comes in who's a high roller who also happens to be a fucking bigot, well, we have to cater to him, so let's get all the women off the floor and all the blacks off the floor too. What, they don't like the good old days when the women had to walk around the casinos offering cigars and cigarettes? 1993. In congressional testimony, Trump said that some Native American reservations operating casinos shouldn't be allowed because they don't look like Indians to me. Okay, now let's get up to the 2000s. In the year 2000, in opposition to a casino proposed by St. Regis Mohawk tribe, which he saw as a financial threat to his casinos in Atlantic City, Trump secretly ran a series of ads that suggesting the tribe had a record of criminal activity that is well documented. I don't know, it still seems kind of racist, but I'm sure defenders will go, oh, well, he's just doing whatever he can for his business. Excuses, excuses. 2004, in the season 2 of The Apprentice, Trump fired Kevin Allen, a black contestant, for being overeducated. You're an unbelievably talented guy in terms of education, and you haven't done anything, said on the show. At some point, you have to say, that's enough. Really? In 2005, Trump publicly pitched that what was essentially The Apprentice white people versus black people, he said, wasn't particularly happy with most recent season of his show, so he considered an idea that was fairly controversial, creating a team of successful African Americans versus a team of successful whites. Whether people like the idea or not, it is somewhat reflective of our very vicious world. Okay. 2010. There was a huge national controversy over the Ground Zero Mosque, a proposal to build a Muslim community center in Lower Manhattan near the site of 9/11 attacks. Trump opposed the project, calling it insensitive, and offered to buy out one of the investors in the project. On The Late Show with David Letterman, Trump argued, referring to Muslims, well, someone's blowing us up, someone's blowing up buildings, and someone's doing lots of bad stuff. Just to let some people know here, because I remember this case back in the day, which was 2010, so back in the day, around the area of Ground Zero, not visible like right there where the Twin Towers were, but a little around the corner there was a Muslim madrasa. So there were Muslims already there, okay? And they already had a center there, and they just wanted to build upon it. That's it. No one was invading anything. No one was blowing anything up. These were actual Americans who were Muslim. But, why stick to facts and reality? 2011. Trump played a big role in pushing false rumors that Obama, the country's first black president, was not born in the United States. Oh, we know this one. He even sent investigators to Hawaii to look into Obama's birth certificate. Obama later released his birth certificate, calling Trump a carnival barker. The research has found a strong correlation between birtherism and this conspiracy theory called racism. Trump has reportedly continued pushing this conspiracy theory in private. Yeah, he continues to do so. And a side note on that, one of the reasons for me that I consider this birtherism as pure racism is not only the fact that he's accusing him of being from another country, but in a very general term. Isn't that like saying, boy, this black guy, he's really articulate, he's really intelligent, he's very soft-spoken, he couldn't possibly be American black, now can he? I guess for these type of people, for them, their only way for them to rest assured that this educated human being with a dark skin pigmentation on the Crayola chart would have to be wearing cornrows and a neck tattoo in order to really be an American black, right? Fucking people. Anyway, still in 2011, while Trump suggested that Obama wasn't born in the US, he also argued that maybe Obama wasn't a good enough student to have gotten into Columbia or Harvard Law School, and demanded Obama release his university transcripts. Trump claimed, "I heard he was a terrible student. Terrible. How does a bad student go from Columbia and then to Harvard?" Well, I don't know. we heard upon your how you try to tout your education there, Trump, and but somehow you threatened the schools to not give up your grades. You know, threatened with suing and bullshit, right? You had you had your fixer work on that before he turned on you and he became something that your minions had to discredit in on the floor of the Congress. But when he was on your side, oh, he was tops. So you go from that, and then that's all the history before he ran for president. And now we go into when he was running for president. Let's start with him launching into calling Mexicans rapists and bringing crime and bringing drugs. But some of them he assumes are good people. I said this in a number of videos. I find it funny how people kind of gloss over when he says when Mexico are sending their people. That term of Mexico is sending people. It's not like individuals on their own or family groups on their own are trying to cross the border. No. The Mexican country, the Mexican government is sending people over. No one ever talks about that. The first time I heard it, I was like, they're sending people? Really? As a candidate in 2015, Trump called for the ban of all Muslims coming to the United States. His administration eventually implemented a significantly watered-down version of the policy. Until they found out what the hell is going on. Yeah, well, we went through that in his first year being president of him trying to implement that as humanly possible. He even had Rudy Giuliani go on, and you knew that the Muslim ban, how they were going to interpret it, was full of shit because Rudy Giuliani admitted to it. He said that Trump went to him and asked him he wanted a Muslim ban. How can we make a Muslim ban legal? And then they go about it as, well, don't talk about the religion, talk about dangerous areas. It's completely legal. Yeah, you just admitted of getting around his desire to ban Muslims from coming into the United States. When asked in 2016, a Republican debate whether all 1.6 billion Muslims hate the United States, Trump said, I mean a lot of them. I mean a lot of them. Yeah, a lot of them. Billion people plus, but a lot of that billion. He argued in 2016 that Judge Gonzalez Curiel, who was overseeing Trump University lawsuit, should recuse himself from the case because of his Mexican heritage and the membership of the Latino Lawyers Association. House Speaker Paul Ryan, who endorsed Trump, later called such comments the textbook definition of a racist comment. Yeah, that was as tough as the wet noodle Paul Ryan was after Trump was president. Christ almighty. Alright. Trump has been repeatedly slow in condemning white supremacists who endorse him, and his regular retweets messages from white supremacists and neo-Nazis during his presidential campaign. He tweeted and later deleted an image that showed Hillary Clinton in front of a pile of money and by a Jewish Star of David and said the most corrupt candidate ever. The tweet had some very obvious anti-Semitic imagery, but Trump insisted that the star was a sheriff's badge and said that his campaign shouldn't have deleted it. Trump has repeatedly referred to Senator Elizabeth Warren as Pocahontas, using her controversial and later walked-back claims of Native American heritage as a punchline. At the 2016 Republican convention, Trump officially seized the mantle of the law and order candidate, an obvious dog whistle playing to the white fears of black crime. Even though crime in the United States is historically low, his speeches, comments, and executive actions after he took office continues this line of messaging. And let me add to that, because for somebody who's been watching this guy as president, I ask you, my gentle snowflakes, When does he ever mention white crime? At all. And how is it that, you know, even when he talks about places like Chicago, I mean, Chicago and then Baltimore, talking about how horrible these places are, how dangerous these places are. As much as they could be possibly dangerous, they also is a little bit of a racial component to that, isn't it? Isn't that a little bit code there? Because there's plenty of places in these United States that economically and in conditions for their people is far worse. You can look down Kentucky and see how many little townships there is far worse off than Baltimore. But since Moscow Mitch is such a gosh darn supporter of Trump, I guess we don't hear about that. Which also, of course, lends into the argument of even if he has white opposition to him, that he never goes after his white rivals' hometowns and say that they're rat infested places that no human being could possibly live in. But I digress. In a pitch to black voters in 2016, Trump said, "You're living in poverty, your schools are no good, you have no jobs, 58% of your youth is unemployed, what the hell do you have to lose?" I remember some of this during the campaign. It's just how black people were living in hell, that they can't walk from here to there without running from bullets. I live in Northern Virginia. Um, I have a good number of black neighbors living amongst me, and somehow magically there are no bullets flying anywhere. So this notion that all blacks live in their own segregated little ghettos in these various towns, that's lovely 1950s thinking on up, but that's not the reality. But he's pandering towards people who have a fear of the other, of anything different that they have no experience with, because they keep themselves away for fear of stereotypes. But I digress. Alright. More instances. Trump stereotyped a black reporter at a press conference in 2017 when April Ryan asked him if he planned to meet and work with Congressional Black Caucus. He repeatedly asked her to set up the meeting, even as she insists that she's just a reporter, because apparently all them black people must know each other. Just why? You're compassionate, intelligent people. Why? But I digress. In the week after the white supremacist protests in Charlottesville, Virginia in August 2017, Trump repeatedly said that many sides and both sides were to blame for the violence and chaos that ensued, suggesting that white supremacist protesters were morally equivalent to the counter-protesters that stood against racism. He also said that there were some very fine people among the white supremacists. All this seemed like dog whistles to the white supremacists, and many of them took it as one, with white nationalist Richard Spencer praising Trump for defending the truth. We'll get into a little side tangent on this in a moment. Throughout 2017, Trump repeatedly attacked NFL players who, by taking a knee or otherwise silently protesting the national anthem, demonstrated a systematic racism in America. Yes, he showed more hate towards black athletes taking a knee because of protest of black men, women, and children getting killed without due process by cops. He shows them more hate than anyone outside this country that actually wants to do us harm. But I digress. Trump reportedly said in 2017 that people who came to the United States from Haiti all have AIDS. And he lamented that people who came to the United States from Nigeria will never go back to their huts once they saw America. The White House denied that Trump ever made these comments. Speaking about the immigration, in a bipartisan meeting in 2018, Trump reportedly asked in reference to Haiti and African countries, why are we having all these people from shithole countries coming here? And he reportedly suggested that the U.S. should take more people from countries like Norway. The implication of immigration from prominently white countries are good, while immigrants from predominantly black countries are bad. Nothing to see here, folks. Trump denied making these shithole comments, although some senators present at the meeting said that they happened. The White House, meanwhile, suggested that the comments, like Trump's remarks about the NFL protests, will play well to his base. The only connections between Trump's remarks and the NFL protests and his shithole comments is race. Trump mocked Elizabeth Warren's presidential campaign again, calling her Pocahontas in a tweet before adding, I see you on the campaign trail, Liz. The capitalized trail is seemingly reference to the Trail of Tears, a horrific act of ethnic cleansing in the 19th century in which Native Americans were forcibly relocated, causing thousands of deaths. Now, to add on to this, because Trump praises the presidency of Andrew Jackson and said that if Jackson was alive during the Civil War, there would not have been a Civil War because Jackson had a big heart. You know, there are quotations before the Civil War from Andrew Jackson who, everyone was seeing the writing on the wall that Civil War was coming, that the Grand Compromise that Henry Clay and others came about only staved off the inevitable for about 30 or so years, maybe less. Give me a moment. But each time a territory was about to become a state, they always had to make the choice between a free state or a slave state. And tensions like that kept rising, and there was a lot of incidents that were happening towards abolitionists. Jackson said that the Union must be preserved at all costs. Whether he didn't want there to be a Confederacy. However, when he gets venerated by Trump tactfully neglects the Trail of Tears. He says that he has a big heart. Look up Andrew Jackson. He still wanted to have duels. But I digress. And to our recent little fracas, Trump tweeted that several black and brown members of Congress, Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Ayanna Pressley, Ilhan Omar, and Rashida Tlaib, are from countries whose governments are complete and total catastrophes, and they should go back to those countries. It's a common racist trope that says black and brown people, particularly immigrants, should go back to the countries of their origins. 3 of the 4 members of Congress whom Trump had targeted were born in the United States. And the 4th actually has been a United States citizen longer than his wife. This list is not comprehensive, instead relying on some major examples since Trump announced his candidacy, but once again, there is a pattern of racism and bigotry here. That's just Trump isn't just misspeaking, it is who he is. Alright. So those are the incidents. At least a decent journeyman's list of incidents. However, does this make him a white supremacist or white nationalist? I'm setting aside the racism for a moment because I'll get into that in a moment. My theory, I don't think he is. I don't think he is. And I have a particular reason why I don't think he is. Because in what I've seen of people who are white nationalists or white supremacists, they operate at least on that perceptional level to trying to prop up the white race. That it isn't about them, it's about them defending white people from the horde of the other, making sure white people are always on top in the food chain, anyone who's not white. And for people like the Klan, being non-white is not just being non-peach skin pigmentation, it's also being Catholic or Jewish or anyone who's not a WASP, white Anglo-Saxon Protestant. But the thing is, with Trump, he doesn't care about whites. He doesn't care about blacks. He doesn't care about Hispanics. He doesn't care about Asians. He cares about himself. He's a Trump supremacist. He's only looking out for Trump. You may say that he's looking out for his children, but since his children work for him, he's looking out for himself. They're extensions of him. You know, they'll be the legacy of him. You know, there was talks of him wanting Ivanka to run for president after he gets done with his terms. And the thinking is that, you know, she'll be in the White House, but he'll also be in the White House. So, like Putin in Russia, he'll still have power. Like when Putin left the one supreme post, and then they had Medvedev being the Russian president, but then Putin was still in power because he just switched job titles, essentially. So I don't think he's a white supremacist. I don't think he's a white nationalist. I think he caters to them, absolutely. I think he garners their support, absolutely. And the argument I've heard that he couldn't be because one of the people who are running the Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville said on camera that he didn't much like Trump because he allowed his daughter to marry a Jew. Yeah, I don't believe he's a white supremacist, but I don't think that's the reason. And just because one guy don't like him, he still likes him. He just doesn't officially like him. That don't mean shit. You can find videos of Richard Spencer in like his New York gathering where he was throwing Sig Heil salutes and praised Trump. David Duke has a man crush on him. And like anytime there is a racially charged event that Trump doubles down and triples down on, you see David Duke riding up saying, see, he's protecting us, we should be totally backing him 24/7 because he's defending the white race and he's leading us to a white future. Trump don't give a shit about you. He'll take your support. He'll glad hand you, but he don't give a shit about you. He don't give a shit about anybody. So, for purposes of my thesis, for my theory, he is not a white supremacist. He is not a white national. He's a Trump supremacist. He's a Trump national. He only gives a shit about himself. The people who support him are useful idiots from his thinking. Not from my thinking. I try my best not to be insulting of Trump supporters as individuals. I try. Sometimes it's hard, but I try. Because everybody got reasons for why they support somebody. And 9 times out of 10, it's nobody's business why someone supports somebody. 9 times out of 10. You go into a voting booth and someone asks you who you're voting for. None of your business. I'm going to vote for who I'm voting for. And there's nothing wrong with that. But you see these things, you see the rallies, you see how he behaves, and those who do gravitate around him. And I'm not talking about your average Republican man, or woman, or young adult, young man, young woman. But I'm talking about these people who are avowed racists, who are white supremacists. People who take his signaling or take his amping of rhetoric and turn it into violence that we saw in El Paso. He doesn't think he needs to change his tone or demeanor or manner no matter who gets hurt. I could do another video of the instances of all the times that his words or his actions has inspired people to hurt others. And sometimes it's not even about race, it's just about them feeling that whatever drug of words that he intoxicates people in that make them hurt other people because they are the other. He is, for my thesis, a racist. But he is a racist in a different mode than a white supremacist or a white national. He is not like those who go and actively shout the N-word or seek out people when he's drunk to hurt because they're different. There are many, many levels of racism. And I dare say that any human being of any skin color or any nationality or any religious biases are not immune to feelings of racism. Because racism is not always an overt malicious act or saying something awful or implying something awful of somebody else because of them being different. Racism can be believing in the stereotype. Having no need to go out and actually experience being around other people to understand and learn them. You're just going to assume that whatever stereotype someone tells you happens to be right. It is the thinking in those communities that will not have a Muslim family anywhere near them within a 100-mile radius, that they will vote in their city councils to ban Sharia law. You don't have any Muslims near you. That is pointless. And I don't know why you do that other than to feel good about yourselves. That you're protecting yourselves from something that is nowhere near you. It's all in like in his quotations on blacks. That it doesn't seem to be something that he has much experience being around people as people. I mean, I hate to break it to some of you, but black people are human beings. They go to work. They come home from work. They have fun. They eat. They listen to music. Gee, every one of those things I happen to do. Weird. Are there differences? Yeah, but this is the United States of America. We cherish our differences. As Reagan said in one of his famous speeches, is that the United States is the one place on the planet where you come in and you come in here no matter where you come from, and you do that oath if you're from some other place, or if you are, or you're born here but you're born not of some European stock. You're an American. You're an Asian American. You're an African American. You're a Hispanic American. European American. You don't, just because you are born in Japan because your father or your mother is stationed there in the military doesn't make you Japanese. You could go to their schools. You can live in their neighborhood, but you won't be considered Japanese. You can speak the language fluently, but you wouldn't be considered Japanese. That's and that's a cultural thing. I mean, you can say whether that's right or wrong. That is a matter of subjective opinion. But that's the difference between some place like Japan and the United States. We're all here. When you're here, we're all Americans. Now, the thing is, with Trump and those people that gravitate towards Trump, people like Stephen Miller, who've always had an agenda against immigration, and not just illegal immigration, but legal immigration. They're running this past year, over 2 years, their activities towards people not only crossing the border, which has been on a nearly 40-plus year low of actual border crossings, they nonetheless scare up the white folk on the invasion and the caravans of illegals that are coming in, bringing drugs and raping people, scaring you with the other, human trafficking. So it becomes not so much of a problem when you separate them at the border as a matter of deterrence. You separate child from mother and father. And I don't care what bullshit executive order he said he writes down on a piece of toilet paper saying that he stops separating children. He is still separating children. You want any proof of that? Then check out that raid, that ICE raid they did on Coke Foods, where 600 plus people were taken away. While some of their children were on their first day of school, and they had nowhere to go home to because there was no parent there. I think that they're separating kids anymore. They separated a 4-month-old from her mother's breast while they took the mother away, and they're still detained. ICE makes no apologies. ICE don't give a shit that there's a crying child on TV. They're not social workers. Kenny Cuccinelli who we Virginians know who he is. Mr. Vaginal Probe for any woman who dares exercise their choice. He wants to try to rewrite the poem on the Statue of Liberty for people who bring you your tired, your poor, your huddled masses who can stand on their own 2 feet and are not going to be on the public charge. You know, people. First, the NPR interview where the woman brought up that poem and he rephrased it like that, and then when other people questioned him on that article or that interview, he accuses them of twisting his words and says, I wasn't talking about a poem, there was never any poem. And, talked over people when they were, no, you were doing that. No, he has to talk over them because we have to. We can't allow reality to exist when we're trying to produce fantasy. Because our boss doesn't live in reality and we want to appease our boss, as loyal sycophants as you are. I think Trump is a racist, not in the same sense as people who go out and actively harm people or talk about them blacks or them Jews or them others while they're pounding down beers in a bar. No. Trump is self-centric. Everything is about him. So whatever benefits him, he will promote wholeheartedly. If anything is a detriment to him, he will diminish and dehumanize and do whatever he can to destroy with the public perception, or at least for his fan base. And when he has people who are black who are supporting him or following him, even on a rally, he will point to us, look at my African American over there. I mean, how does that not make you think of those disgusting lawn jockeys statues that people would have out in their front yard? Look at my African American. So, my thinking on that is that, yes, he's a racist. And no, he's not a white nationalist. He's not a white supremacist. He doesn't give a shit about whites. He doesn't care if whites are on top. He doesn't care about anybody but himself. And just because he does something positive doesn't change the overall. I'm glad he did the thing that help those in prison get out for bullshit charges like marijuana. That's great. That doesn't redeem him for doing one good act. Richard Nixon, before Trump, was the most corrupt president that we've ever seen in the modern era. I'm sure people dig up Franklin Pierce, they'll find out he actually ran over a woman in a carriage in front of the White House because he was drunk. That was bad. But in the modern era, Nixon was someone who had many demons in his life. He had a lot of insecurities. He had a lot of hatreds for people, like the Kennedys. He blamed everyone else but his own actions. What does that sound like? But even Nixon wasn't all bad, or at least he didn't do all bad. Because of Nixon, we have the Environmental Protection Agency, the agency that Trump is doesn't give a shit to hand over to CEOs of gas companies who've long since fought against the EPA so they can eliminate these restrictions that actually saves our environment, that actually kept animals alive longer than when people thought they were just going to go extinct. And Trump did one good thing. Hey, that doesn't mean he's not a racist. Everyone has motivations to doing good or bad things. Even sign some things into law. You know, there's an advantage to doing that. There's a way for it's a good photo op to have people arrayed around you that you would never interact with or associate with ever in your life, except for when it is your advantage to do so. But you give him credit that he signed a piece of paper that other people have been working on for years. That's fine. Give him the credit. If it's his, it's his. No one should rob anyone of their just earnings. And if he earned it, then that we should be happy to applaud. But do not allow that to be the justification to put blinders on to everything else that is said or done. People's justification of his rhetoric towards Baltimore, now that's not racist. Just because the conditions of the actual town, and bringing up Bernie Sanders saying living in a third world that walking around that neighborhood was walking around like a third world country, even though not understanding that the context is that we living in the most richest, in the most wealthiest country on the planet, and yet we still have neighborhoods like this. You know, there are conditions in other places that are worse. Republican or Democrat, it doesn't matter who's running the place. You know, it is any human being can be guilty of mismanagement of monies. There could be conditions that are going on, businesses or big tycoons that just use up an area and soak it for whatever it's worth, and then walk away with the money, and then just leave them in a lurch. There are towns that, like in the early part of the 20th century, were big boom towns. My family comes from Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania, and in the early part of the 20th century, Wilkes-Barre was one of the major towns in Pennsylvania because of the mining. It was a mining town. Well, mining dried up, and now the town is no longer a shadow of its past glory. I've been there a few times, and the last time I was there as a young adult, it's a sad commentary to see that the main street, that where everything was happening, is now no longer happening. There's some work of revitalization that's been happening in a few years, and I wish them luck. I hope so. You don't want any place to fail. But, you know, I remember the only places that had any, like, teeming life, shall we say, was, like, on the strip of all the retail businesses and so forth that was right off the highway. So pretty much where you turn your car off off the ramp, and then you're in Wilkes-Barre, that area. Again, why it's racist is you don't hear him saying this about places that a white rival comes from. Why is that? And if we actually are honest and talking about the conditions of places and trashing those places because of their conditions, then why isn't he talking about Kentucky? Why isn't he talking about certain towns in West Virginia that need help? That a lot of them need help. Well, they're not representative by a political rival, right? So their mishaps and whatever's happening in that town, we don't need to hear about because we can't insult it. But we can insult Baltimore now, can't we? Because Elijah Cummings' district is partially in it. And it's funny how he does go after him for that. When the portion of Baltimore, I believe, that he represents isn't the place where people are pointing the finger at. So, in his usual reckless manner, is he labeling all of Baltimore? And those places outside of Baltimore? And it's the suburb sections of Baltimore, like Ellicott City or Sykesville? Or was he just talking about those places where the certain skin pigmentation is that are down on their luck? And I didn't hear of any talk of wanting or yearning for improvement for these places and for these people. I just heard him trashing it. And those people inside it. No human being would want to live there. Yeah. No, he's a racist. But here's the thing. And he can be, you have to, and I kept saying this, I've been saying this for the past few videos. The more overt he is in what he says, the more that draws your attention and draws the media's attention that they're going to put that in the headlines, what he says in a fucking tweet. That they're going to have, you're going to go news show after news show, media after media with these panels of people, talking about, analyzing what he meant or what he says when he's being a racist asshole. Giving more attention to a racist asshole because he's president than any other racist asshole that we justly and rightly ignore because he's a racist and he's an asshole. But since he's president, we have to analyze every single word that he says, which is great for a megalomaniac. Oh, they're all on my attention. Great. But while he has you here talking about this shit, we won't be noticing how he doesn't know what a tariff is. That we won't notice him weakening the Endangered Species Act. Won't notice that he's fully prepared to sell off national land for development. Won't notice, as my friend brought up, that they're wanting to reintroduce or reinstitute the death penalty for federal cases. All that stuff, that's not sexy. That's not racism. That's not him being hand-waving to draw your attention. This is just, but he does it two ways. He does it to draw your attention away from it. He does it to shore up his base like he really needs to. Because since he's never in a realm of consequence, he never has to question himself on what is right or wrong, because He's not allowed ever to be wrong. No one can ever tell him he's wrong. So even when he says something completely stupid, no one challenges him and no one corrects him, not even in the media. How many times has you seen anyone fact check him on the spot when he says something stupid, patently, utterly wrong? When have you? How many fingers do you have to use for that? You know, people in the media can like fact check him, you know, after the fact and during their little, you know, panels. But I don't defend whenever he goes after the media because that is the fourth estate, and we do need the vigilance of people to look into stuff, look beyond him being racist and an asshole, see what's actually being done underneath. And there's some great reporters out there who really do bust their ass to try to give you this information that they don't want you to have. But on the flip side of the coin, you do have to acknowledge that certain channels from the left or to the right are only trying to cater to their ratings and those majorities that watch them. So where you do have people that actually want you to either have the truth, have the facts, or have you enough information to allow you to decide for yourself as an intelligent human being what you perceive is right or wrong, then you have those who just want to cater to their fan base for their networks and, you know, just tote the party line, whatever that party is. One of the things, you know, as somebody who watches the left-leaning news, that I get annoyed with is that when we have segments on these news shows that you are not telling me anything new. So you're just rehashing old stuff that Trump had said just to stir things up and just to have a conversation as if there's not any other world news happening in the day. That annoys me. But I get annoyed easy. I mean, hell, I rant. You can tell. Alright, so final analysis for all of this, as John F. Kennedy would say. Is he a white nationalist? White supremacist? No. He doesn't give a shit about the white race. He gives a shit about Trump. He's a Trumpist. He's a Trump supremacist. His flag is not a red, it's an orange. Orange power! Is he a racist? Yes. Because he doesn't give a shit on what he needs to say or do to draw the attention. He doesn't really want to experience anything different, so he'll run with the stereotype and he'll flaunt the stereotype, and he will cater to those who follow his thinking of the stereotype. Should he be called out? Absolutely, in every instance. But you call him out, like I call him out, as a racist asshole, tempering with the knowledge that he's doing this to distract you, that there are things that he's doing underneath the radar that he doesn't want you to pay attention to, that the Republican Party doesn't want you to pay attention to, because while you're worrying about this shit over here, then you don't happen to notice that how many appellate judges on the district court that were upheld from the Obama administration, that they're now plugging away and filling up. And you think that doesn't matter? That's the same thinking as people thinking that local politics doesn't matter. And that's why, like in 2010, when the Tea Party did their move in the midterms. Not only that was devastating on the national level, it was devastating for those who are liberal or Democrat when local governments were also turning and state houses were turning. We're getting that back. We were getting a lot of that back in 2018, but it's not enough. You know, to put this, to end this as sort of a rah-rah for the next election, my friends and acquaintances who are Democratic or liberal-leaning, moderates, or Republicans who remember that they're Republicans and not the party of Trump, who remember the days when they were Reagan Republicans or Bush Republicans, who presented family values and Christian morality, and those things were not negotiable because they had a corrupt hedonist plutocrat as a president, who are disgusted with what represents them in their party. Those Republicans who did not jump ship yet, who are still considering themselves Republican, vote for Bill Weld or try to get Sanford. Fine. But you want to turn this around. 59% on a Fox News poll saying that we're going on the wrong track, that President Trump is making things worse. Not only in all the topics, including race relation, they fault him for his lackluster photo op that he was doing in Dayton and for El Paso. You know, I'm never going to forgive him for bringing back that baby in order to do the little fucking thumb up for, yeah, that child that lost her mother and father and arm broken from the impact. Now let's bring that child back because I want a photo op with that. It's not enough to just worry about the president and to vote against the president. If you are not a fan of the Republican Senate, you're not a fan of certain members of the Senate who are so sycophantic to this president that they have surrendered their own values that they've touted for decades, that have defiled themselves and their legacy in order to defend this man and protect this man, they got to go too, and their time is up in this election. And they feel invincible. No matter how popular they are in their own states, the positions of power that they hold now, they feel themselves invincible. Rob them of that feeling. Vote against them. Take them out of office. Show them the will of the people. You don't have to be more violent to defend the will of the people than going into a voting booth and then filling in the space of who you're voting for paper ballots. It's 2019. We're supposed to be better. Every year we're supposed to be better than the year before. We're supposed to progress. Not regress. And this era of Trump, we have to progress forward. We cannot go backwards. Because his whole rhetoric of us going back to a time when America was great again, you know, socially that sounds like when, you know, American was white centric in the 1950s, or when economically, when the go-go 80s, when you had the white men and women in the business suits and the shoulder pads, and they were doing coke while they were enjoying the excess of their wealth. While us common folk was doing what we always do, live paycheck by paycheck, and being told who to blame for our lot in life. I don't know about you, but I am where I am today because of me, good and bad. Of the things that I have accomplished, the things that I have failed at, is where I am today. No one else is a contributing factor to me. Right or wrong, good or bad. They want you to blame others. And then in that blaming, look to them as your savior. Trump said in a rally in New Hampshire that, you may like me, you may not like me, but you gotta vote for me. Because if you don't, your 401ks will go down the tubes. Everything will go down the tubes. That's fear fucking mongering. It's egomania. And I don't care how fucking entertaining he is. You gotta vote for me? Bullshit. You gotta accomplish shit. You no longer have an excuse that Trump is this unknown element. You now have 2+ years of seeing what he does as president. You see how he behaves as president. Yeah, he's a dancing bear at a rally. Great. Makes people laugh. Great. Comedians can make people laugh. How many comedians run for office? They know better. We are better than this. Americans, Democrats, Republicans, independents, liberals, conservatives, white, black, Asian, Hispanic, straight, gay, LGBT, Catholic, Protestant, Jewish, Muslim, Hindu, Sikh, Taoist. In the United States, we are capable of so much. There is a promise, the idealism that we all grew up with, that there's a promise that all you need to do to achieve it is to go out and achieve it. He's giving you excuses not to achieve, and making sure that when you don't achieve, you blame somebody else for it. Now this is the rant. The other part was the thesis. This is the rant. My friends and acquaintances, I love you guys and gals. I appreciate those who actually watch this. At some point, I'm going to get off my ass. I'm going to have a YouTube channel. And the floods of people that are not going to like what I'm going to say about their precious little Don Don. But it has to be said. And there's already a leak of what they want to do, this Trump administration. You can find it. It's floating around the articles. Trump wants to find a way to censor political discourse, especially that opposes him. Evidently, maybe he was a fan of John Adams' Alien Sedition Act. If he actually read something. Maybe this is just a sheer magical coincidence. But, at some point, if he has his way, like any autocratic dictator does, when he has control over the country and all its aspects, is to tamp down dissident information. Silence the voices of those that oppose. Only promote those that sycophantically follow the party line. Now, I am not known yet, but my voice can disappear quite easily. There are many more famous people that also can be in such danger. But that doesn't mean I stop. That doesn't mean anybody else stops. When it's all said and done, when all the famous people, all the political people, when they do their fight, the good fight, and then they fall by the wayside, all that's left is us. We, the people of the United States of America, who wants to do only to defend our country, foreign and domestic enemies, and those who would damage us, be it intentionally or recklessly, unintentionally, nonetheless responsible of. And if we don't call it out, if we live in fear of calling anything out, that we just hush and whisper and not talk the politics that needs to be talked, and things happen without resistance, and only our children and our children's children will reap the aftermath of what that means. Boy, I end these videos in such high points, don't I? Alright, you have a good morning, and I'll see you in the next time I feel the need to express myself. The urge of the rant will be rising. Maybe then I'll be on YouTube.